What if the person you loved the most was not who they seemed? What if the man who looked like he had nothing, who wore torn clothes and sat on a cold sidewalk, was secretly a billionaire who had everything the world could offer except for the one thing he truly wanted? What if love was a test disguised as poverty, a search for truth hidden beneath the weight of rags? This is not just a love story. It is a story of beauty, of deception, of heartbreak, and of a love so pure it had to be tested. And it begins with a young woman named Isabella. Isabella was the kind of woman whose presence lingered in a room long after she left. She was beautiful, yes, but her beauty wasn't the kind you found on glossy magazine covers or in glamorous films. Hers was a beauty that whispered rather than shouted, the kind that made people turn their heads without quite realizing why her laughter was rare. But when it came, it was like a melody that could brighten even the darkest corner. Her kindness was not an act, but a way of being. She lived in a small apartment above her aunt's old bakery and worked in a modest flower shop tucked between a bookstore and a cafe on 5th and Main. Every morning she woke before the sun, tied her long dark hair into a braid, and walked to the shop with a quiet determination. She loved flowers and the way each bloom carried a language of its own. Roses whispered of passion, lilies of purity, orchids of elegance. She believed flowers were more than decorations. They were stories waiting to be told. And across the street, leaning against the brick wall of the old library, there was always a man. His clothes were worn, his beard unkempt, his hands rough from a life without comfort. He never shouted for coins or chased after pedestrians. He simply sat there, silent, observing the world with eyes that seemed to carry the weight of many lifetimes. Most people ignored him. Some pitied him. Others mocked him. But Isabella noticed him. One morning the air was sharp and cold, the kind of morning where frost bites the skin. Isabella stepped out of her shop carrying a bucket of fresh roses when she saw him shivering. Without a second thought, she reached into her bag, pulled out her favorite scarf, crossed the street and placed it gently over his shoulders. The man looked up, startled. His eyes, dark and piercing, locked onto hers. There was something there she couldn't name, something deep, something that didn't belong to a beggar. "You don't have to," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I know," she said softly, smiling. "But I want to." That moment became the beginning of everything. From then on, Isabella greeted him each morning. Sometimes she brought coffee, sometimes a sandwich, sometimes just her smile. Slowly he began to speak his name. He told her it was Daniel. He asked about her flowers, her shop, her dreams. She asked about his life. But whenever she did, his eyes would cloud and he would change the subject. Some stories, he would say quietly, are better told when the time is right. Despite his silence about his past, Isabella felt a connection growing. She noticed things others did not. The way he spoke carefully, with thoughtfulness and precision, as if he had once lived in rooms filled with books and debates. The way he carried himself, even in rags, with a dignity that did not match his circumstances. Her friends, however, did not understand. Why waste your kindness on him? They sneered. He's just a beggar, you're too good for that. Even her boss at the flower shop grew annoyed. You spend too much time with him, Isabella. Customers notice, people talk. But Isabella didn't care. She believed in seeing people for who they were, not for what they wore. As the weeks turned to months, their bond deepened. One evening, Daniel walked her home. His steps were slow, hesitant, as though burdened with something he could not yet share. "Isabella," he said softly, "why do you care for me?" She looked at him, surprised. "Because you matter." "But I have nothing to give you," he whispered. She smiled. "You give me more than anyone else ever has. You listen, you see me, you make me laugh. That's enough." Daniel's eyes glistened. Though he said nothing more that night, under the glow of the streetlights he kissed her for the first time. It was not the desperate kiss of a man clinging to hope, but the tender kiss of someone who had finally found what he had been searching for. For Isabella, love was simple. She loved him for who he was. For Daniel, love was complicated, because beneath the disguise of worn clothes and dirt, he was no beggar. He was a man of unimaginable wealth, a billionaire who had grown tired of false smiles and shallow affections. He had built an empire of steel and glass, owned estates and cars, traveled the world, yet remained alone. Every woman he had dated in the past saw his wealth first and him second. He was a man admired for his fortune, but never truly known for his heart. Daniel had created his disguise out of desperation, longing to find a soul who could see past the gold. He chose a random street corner in a quiet neighborhood, put on ragged clothes and waited. Most people walked by, until Isabella. The more she cared for him, the more he feared losing her. The more she loved him for who he appeared to be, the more he dreaded the moment when the truth would come out. Because what if she felt betrayed? What if she left him once she realized the life he had hidden? And so he lived in two worlds. By day, the quiet beggar by the library wall, and by night, the billionaire no one suspected was missing from his world. But love cannot live in shadows forever. One morning, Isabella arrived at the shop to find his spot empty. Days passed, then weeks. Her heart ached with every sunrise. She searched near the shelters, the alleys, the benches where he might have slept. Nothing. She feared the worst. Had he left without saying goodbye? Was he hurt? Was he gone forever? Then one evening, just as she was closing the shop, a sleek black car stopped outside. The door opened, and out stepped a man in a tailored suit, polished shoes, and eyes she knew better than anyone. "Daniel?" she gasped. He nodded, his expression unreadable. "Isabella, I need to tell you the truth." And there, among the scent of roses and lilies, he revealed everything. The fortune, the empire, the disguise, the test. "All I wanted," he said, voice trembling, "was to find someone who would love me not for my wealth but for my heart. And you, Isabella, you saw me when no one else did. You gave me kindness when I had nothing. You passed the test I thought no one could." Tears filled her eyes, not from anger but from relief. "You fool," she whispered, smiling through her tears. "I would have loved you if you had nothing, and I'll love you even if you have everything." Their love became legend, but legends are not without trials. For Daniel, revealing his identity was only the beginning. The world that had once ignored him as a beggar now clamored for him as a billionaire. Isabella was suddenly thrust into a spotlight she had never asked for. Paparazzi followed her every step. Gossip columns dissected her life. Women who had once looked down on her now envied her. Men who had once courted her with arrogance now tried to win her favor with charm. One man in particular, Thomas, a wealthy businessman's son, had pursued Isabella before. She had rejected him politely but firmly. When he discovered that she was now with Daniel, his jealousy turned to spite. He spread rumors, suggesting Isabella had tricked Daniel, that she had known about his wealth all along. The whispers reached Daniel's boardrooms. His advisors warned him, "She's after your money, it's too convenient, too perfect." Daniel defended her fiercely, but the seed of doubt was planted. For the first time, Isabella noticed hesitation in his eyes. One night, unable to bear the tension, she confronted him. "Do you believe them, Daniel? Do you think I loved you because of your money?" His silence broke her heart more than words ever could. She turned away, tears blinding her. "I loved you when I thought you had nothing. If you can't believe that, then maybe you never truly knew me." For days they were apart. Isabella retreated into the sanctuary of her flower shop, pouring her pain into the arrangements she created. Daniel, torn between love and doubt, realized that his wealth had once again poisoned what he valued most. Finally, he went back to the old library wall, put on the same ragged clothes, and sat where he once had. He waited. Hours passed. The world moved on around him. And then across the street, Isabella emerged from the shop. She saw him for a moment. She froze. Then slowly she crossed the street and knelt beside him, just as she had that first day. "Here," she whispered, wrapping a scarf around his shoulders. "I know, but I want to. Daniel broke down. "Forgive me, Isabella. I let the world's doubts drown out what I already knew. You are the one thing in my life that is true." She lifted his face, her eyes steady. "Then trust me. Always." They reconciled, stronger than before. And when Daniel introduced her to his world officially, he did not do it with a grand announcement or a flashy party. Instead, he took her hand, stood before his board of directors, and said simply, "This is the woman who saw me when none of you did. She is my heart without her." All of this means nothing. Some scoffed, some whispered, but Daniel did not care. For the first time in his life, he was not performing for anyone else. He was simply living his truth. Isabella and Daniel married in a quiet ceremony, surrounded by the people who truly mattered. There were no flashing cameras, no glittering ballrooms, just a garden filled with flowers, a handful of loved ones and vows spoken from the heart. Even after the mansions and cars became part of her life, Isabella remained unchanged. She still ran her flower shop, still greeted her neighbors, still crossed the street each morning to where Daniel would sometimes sit in disguise. Reminding himself of the day he found her, she still brought him coffee. She still whispered, "Here, I know, but I want to." Because true love doesn't see wealth, it sees the heart. So what would you do if you met someone who looked like they had nothing? Would you have the courage to see everything they really are? Or would you walk away? Remember, sometimes the richest hearts hide behind the poorest faces.